report. Okay, there we go. I don't know, maybe I thought, I got a message from one of the subscribers that they just listened to module 4 session. So I thought, well, maybe people didn't have time to listen to module 5.
Sure.
In part because there are 2 sessions and they're long. So
Sure.
I thought maybe that would be a problem. But anyway, let me just say right off the bat for people who are not here today but are going to be listening in that the steps to an apology is in the toolbox. And also, as is the article, Is Your Partner Really More to Blame? Which is the article I had the clients read between the first and the second session that you heard. And I don't know if people scroll all the way down to the toolbox, so that's where they are. Okay, so I will just, get started and take your questions and your comments. And if hopefully you'll have some for me, and we'll get started with that. With just the 2 of you, this is part of what I was hesitating. What am I going to do if nobody shows up? So I was thinking about just saying a little more about how I struggled between the first and the second session.
Sure.
And but I didn't know how I was going to fill the time, so we'll see.
we'll have a private consultation. That's always good too.
Yeah, that's
not bad for me. Yes. I think Todd is joining us, just to let you know. So I had spoken to him, so I think at least he's joining.
The first thought, I made little notes. I think I mentioned to you, Sarah, that I go through and I copy everything and I put it in a big notebook, just because the resources are phenomenal. They are so good as handouts for clients, for futures. And I'm somebody who needs to have it in my hand rather than online. So I've copied everything I can possibly copy. I copy my notes while you're talking during the interview, and it's incredibly helpful. It's something about that is making it integrate better. But being more physically engaged, something about that is working for me.
Wow, thank you so much for saying that. It really warms my heart. It's just, it gives me an incentive to go on. Working on the content is, while I have my clinical practice, is the hardest thing I'm doing this year.
Yes.
So it really,
massive. The content is massive.
Yeah.
I appreciate so much the structure that you're putting on it. That I feel that as I go through it. It's been, over 30 years since I've been in a classroom, right? So I think it's so great to have you say, this is this model, this is this model, this is this model, and this is how this impacts how you're thinking in the sessions. It's just, that part is really standing out for me. The overview of all the different approaches to couples counseling, because I feel like over 30 years, I'm sort of pulling from lots of things, but I haven't thought about it as systematically as you're laying it out. And so it's really helpful for me to say, that's more of a developmental kind of question, or this is more of a question focused on their family of origin issues. And thinking through those things is helping me be more specific, which is great, in a way that I think I was a little, maybe it's natural or ad hoc after a while, but it's really helpful to go back to the rigor of thinking, why are you asking that?
Carolyn, that is really interesting to me, because my brain doesn't work that way. It's very hard for me to sit here and go, oh, even after I've read all the stuff, to go, oh, that's developmental, this is solution focused. I know I call on them, kind of like you said, but my brain is not a detail-oriented brain. And so it's much harder for me to label things. I know what I do and why I do it, but I don't know how to label what I'm doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The way I'm thinking about it, because I am I'm a couples therapist too, and I'm influenced by by what I'm reading and what I'm writing. And what it does to me is it makes me a little more creative. It reminds me of more stuff gives me more tools, more ideas. I remember when I was teaching, I was reading this stuff and preparing for classes and for teaching, and that's what it did. It made me think about, I used to joke that the questions I ask are a reflection of what I read the night before. So that when we,
True.
this is right. So this is why it's so important to keep learning in our profession, right? Because we do, even for the most experienced couples therapists, this work is really, really hard. And the more exposure we have to any material, it gives us more flexibility, more creativity, more tools in our repertoire. Um, anyway, so that's what it does to me. So I'm not surprised to hear you say that. To Hi Todd.
Hello.
So I'm hoping that we can, thank you so much. Like I said, this feedback is really helpful for me. It gives me the incentive to keep going and put in the hard work of creating the content. Um, the sessions are not that hard for me, except, well, what's hard is the vulnerability part that, I'm exposing my work to the world, but the writing the frameworks is not an easy thing to do. So I'm hoping to hear a bit about your questions about the two sessions, and maybe questions about the frameworks, or whatever it is you want to talk about.
Well, I've
Yeah.
got one note, and this is just kind of a reinforcement. How you kept turning their awarenesses of their differences into the path forward. I loved those words, and you kept, even though he'd go off and find some negative, you'd say, "Well, that's the path forward." And by the time it was done, I had the sense they both got it, that their limitations were the path forward.
Yes,
Mhm.
right, exactly. Yes.
I will use that, by the way, from now on.
Right. Whatever is hard for people to do is what they have to do. Whatever is hard is what they need to work on and do. And hopefully they'll be motivated enough to do that, which some people are and some people are not.
Mhm.
And this was a couple you had worked with for quite a while. Am I remembering that correctly? Is that, yeah,
Well, not
or
really.
not that? Okay, I
So
was mixing them.
I think you heard them in module 3.
Yes.
You heard them in module 3, and what did I forgot what I should have reviewed it. I think I walked them through a very sort of elementary dialogue thing where they had trouble, they were on the brink of divorce. They stopped the divorce proceedings. Um, and like so many couples come in, well, we're going to give this one more chance, and as if I could, as if I had the magic wand, and so I realized, like, within the first 5 or 6 sessions, of all the hurt after walking them through a limited dialogue tool, something about some ridiculous thing in the morning one of them wanted to, I don't even remember what it was. But I thought about this. I said, there's no way these guys are going to be able to do anything until each of them uh, can do this. And so that's why I set up the whole protocol about the apology and the apology. And I, So in answer to your question, did I see them for a long time? Not
No.
really. No.
Well, that's interesting because what I was thinking, what prompted that question was, it was, you really had to sort of push them into engaging this, and it felt like high risk, high gain. Like it worked, but it also felt like this is, they have a lot of strong feelings behind their positions, and they're holding on to them, as anyone does. But I was impressed with how you could just kind of cut in and say, and sort of stop it as it was happening, I guess. It felt like there was a lot of trust in you from the way that you were intervening, and saying, hold on, I'm stopping you there. That's this kind of thing that is, kitchen sinking or so on. And they seemed to take it, which was great. I mean,
yeah, I think that is a good point. And I think you're hearing sessions with people who do have a high level of trust. I don't think, let's see, I'm trying to think if I mean, the sessions are difficult. I think in module 6, you'll hear a very, very difficult session. But I don't think I can show you one where the level of trust is low. I don't know that I end up working with them. I don't know that I end up, so yeah, very soon after we started, within the first 2 or 3 sessions, but this is not unusual for the way I work, that people, I do something really small that I think will help them to increase their motivation and increase and feel like they've succeeded. I do something in the session that's small. And then I do a lot of praising and a lot of, helping each of them to appreciate what the other has done, sort of slowing things down or lowering their reactivity, or, what's, it's different every time, but I think this is what I tried to do very early on, and that for when it works, it increases their level of trust in me enormously. And I think every good couples therapist knows how to do that, where they each feel that you can help each of them. I mean, it's not, I know that they come with a lot of blame, but underneath, if they feel like you can only help one of them and not the other, they're not going to stick around.
Right.
Their loyalty to each other is stronger than what they appear to have. In many, many cases, I've learned that. So if you begin to give a very hard time to one member of the couple and not the other, they'll let you know you're giving them a hard time. So anyway, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but you're right. There is a high level of trust, and people let me do things that I feel privileged that they let me do it. They, yeah.
There was a point where, and I think it was in the second session, where he just went on and on several times. And I was aware of feeling really frustrated and wanting you to stop him somehow and kind of projecting that she was feeling really frustrated. But I didn't get that sense in the second session, that it was bothering her that much. In the beginning, it did. In the session 3, in the lesson 3. But here, I had the sense she was so thrilled that he understood anything about her, that she was very open. And I was sitting there struggling hugely and wanting him to shut up and get back on track. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think that is, that is a problem for him, that he doesn't know when to stop. So you heard me say things like, say it in a few words, don't, or write it in a few sentences, don't write 10 pages. And because he and I had that conversation before, and I do believe that one of my, but I have that very clear in my mind that I want to help people become more succinct
Mhm.
and more clear about what they want to say. Um, I have to tell you what he did in between the first and the second session was awful.
Mm.
It was really awful. He sent me like a 5-page letter and it was full of blame and he was not able to do it.
Yeah.
And and so I had a like a 1 hour long session with him in between, and that's when I think I made him read part of the article, "Is your partner really more to blame?" in the middle
Yeah.
of the session with me, or I read
Mhm.
part of it with to him. I can't remember. And then and I acknowledged, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe you can't do this. Maybe this is too hard. Maybe you're so hurt that this is not going to work. Um, you don't have to agree with her. You just have to see it from her point of view. Um, she will do the same. She's hurt you too. And I'm working with her in the same way I'm working with. I mean, it was really tough.
Yeah.
And and then he did it.
Huh?
He did it. He sent me another version, and it was amazing. And the way that you heard him do it,
Yeah.
and this really was a huge change. Like, he has a long way to go, obviously, and I don't know what's going to happen with him, but he was able to do it, and I was really
Mhm.
happy to see that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned a couple of times sort of wondering if it was a mistake to engage the exercise or if you couldn't do it. Well, I don't know if we can theorize, but what would you do if it felt, I mean, what would it look like if it had been a mistake, or how do you assess that, I guess is what I'm trying to sort. And maybe we just find out by doing, but
Yeah. Um, so ask me the question again.
yeah, you had said a couple of times I questioned whether maybe I'd taken them into this apology exercise too soon. And so I'm wondering, what would you do if you discover, oh, this is too soon? How do we, I'm wondering what I would say to them to pull back from that, or whether it would imply some lack of maturity on one of their parts, or how to get around that if that were even the case, right? If he hadn't been able to do it.
Right. The only thing I can think of in terms of an answer is what I've done in the past when I realized that what I tried to do is too soon, too much, and it's not going to work. So this wouldn't be the first time.
Mhm.
Um, so what I tried to yeah, that actually happens quite a bit. So I do
Yeah.
interventions that don't work.
When you say that, I think, yeah, then suddenly it comes to me saying plenty of times to people, okay, that was my idea. It was a bad idea. I mean, I've certainly
Yeah,
said that 100
you
times.
send them some homework, you ask them what
Yeah,
to do, and they
yeah,
don't do it, or
yeah.
they forget. I mean, there's plenty of times when that happens. Now, this would have been a little more. This would have been a harder one to pull back from because I went all in with this, and if they were not able to do it, it would have been tough to pull back from it. I'm trying to think of I don't really know what I would have done. I I I would have said maybe I would have so my if I can remember what I know about myself, I think I would have done one. I would have said pick one and apologize for one.
Mhm.
Maybe that's most likely what I would have done.
Mhm.
In fact, that's what I was doing with him when I saw that he couldn't do it. I said to him, um, "Okay, so pick one that you do agree with." Because he was having a hard time with this disagreement thing. If he didn't agree, he couldn't apologize. He
Mhm.
didn't agree with her position, he couldn't apologize, which is not an unusual position. And so I asked him in that session, pick one that you do agree with. And I don't remember what he said, but it was after that that I think things began to change a little. But I would have pulled back, maybe by not abandoning the whole thing, but maybe by making it shorter, less anxiety provoking, less resistant, What can you do? I may have asked him, what do you think you can do?
Following on that, would you say it's premature? Like, what if the apology would help, but they don't, like, it's about infidelity. Like, I'm saying a single person, not the couple, I'm saying one of the people. And so the apology, they're having to do a similar thing with their therapist. So the apology would help, but they don't agree on the outcome of what's going to happen going forward in the relationship. Like, whether they're going to open up the relationship or that. So if the client likes the apology part, but doesn't agree with like the follow-up or,
I'm not sure I understand what the follow-up means.
I guess part of it was sort of like, what are they going to do if they mess up? Part of it is like, what is the client? I think part of your 7 steps is one of them was like, what are they going to do to, maybe I misread it, rectify it, or what's going to happen if they go through that? So the client likes the apology part, but since they haven't decided whether or not they're going to open up the relationship, is it premature to sort of have the person apologize and saying, I'm sorry it hurt you, but there's no outcome yet. Does that make sense? I guess I'm just trying to figure out.
Yeah, so
he feels like it's premature doing this, but he's going to do it because he's been asked to do it. But he's like, I'm not sure I'm going to be happy if they want to continue with an open relationship.
yeah, so I do want to say something about that. So it's not always easy to do that step. And for the reasons you're describing. So, and I don't know that, I learned this from, I have that step for both very serious offenses and also very light ones. So a light offense would be the step of a compensatory behavior or penalty.
Yes.
Is that the one you're talking
That's
about?
fine. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So the penalty in one serious case I want to tell you about is that, it's not just a penalty. It's like, what are you going to do to redress what you did, right? And so in one very, very serious case that I remember, this one was one I supervised. I was not the therapist in it, but I supervised it. And it was a couple that wanted to stay together and work on their relationship after several severe episodes of domestic violence while the male partner had been drinking. Now, he had since then become sober, and she decided, and he was doing all the work. He was in individual therapy, he was in group therapy, he was doing all the work. He wanted to save the relationship, and he was doing all the work. And so I remember, she had like several siblings who were in law enforcement. And they were all telling her, you're nuts. What are you doing? How can you even consider staying with him after what he did to you? And so that's when I said, well, what compensatory things can he do that would convince her brothers or siblings that this would be a good thing?
Huh.
And right, so, because I think that the client system involves not just the people you have in the room, but everybody who influences your client. And so this was a huge influence on the female partner. And so that's why I always ask, what does your friend think? Or what does your brother think? Or what does your mother think? I mean, I need to understand what influence the clients are under. This is the family therapist in me. So in this case, I remember, so this is what I set up. I had the therapist talk to the female and saying, what is something that he could do that would be so amazing that your family would be convinced that he's in it for the long haul and reformed or whatever. So you know what he ended up doing? And this is something they actually talked about it in the session with them, because I instructed the therapist to help them with this. He ended up becoming a board member of several DV. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And he would give speeches about the impact of domestic violence. I mean, it was an amazing redress.
Mhm.
And he did it, and that satisfied the siblings.
Mhm.
They couldn't believe he was doing that. And so, but they're the ones, he came up with that, or maybe she came up, she said something like, well, you know, what if you talk to the directors of the shelters, or what if you did this, or what if you did that, or whatever. I don't remember if it was shelters or if it was what organization, that I don't remember. But she came up with it, and together they designed it, and he did it.
Hmm.
So this is what I mean in very severe cases. And it also works for very mild situations, like, I've heard people do that. Well, if I don't take out the garbage, then it will be my turn for the next 3 months. And if I don't take out the garbage the way I say I'm going to, so you can set it up for very mild things. Now, but it doesn't work for everything.
Mhm. Mhm.
I also wanted to tell you, this is your question made me think about a couple of things I wanted to tell you about the apology protocol that I did on this session. So you probably, one of the main things you see is the way that they describe the impact. So this is an impact statement. What is so hard for people to do is to be able to write and articulate and communicate the impact of the behavior on the partner. And this comes out of political truth and reconciliation committees, like South Africa did that, and not too many places do that, but it's about recognition. It's what we need to do here, but we haven't. It's about recognition and acknowledgement of the impact of the behavior on the group or on the culture or on the person, which is so that's why you see them really do that, because I put a lot of emphasis on the impact. Remember, I prepare them for this. What you're hearing them do in the beginning, I had prepared them. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. Do you agree with this? Do you think you're comfortable? You think you can do it? So, they each had the list, right, of what they wanted to do, of what they wanted the other person to recognize. And when they wrote the list, they wrote the impact. This is right. So when she was telling him, this is what happened. This is what happened to me. So the biggest piece of the apology is the impact statement, the ways in which the behavior impacted your partner. I'm sorry?
I was going to say what the wife wrote was incredible in terms of her acknowledgement of how she hurt him.
Right.
I mean, that was incredibly touching.
It was incredible. And he was crying. He couldn't believe it, because one of his major complaints in the beginning was that she had no recognition, and she got it because it was the first time she could hear him.
Yeah.
listening is so hard. And she could hear him. And so she was able to, once she got it, she was able to do it. It was beautiful.
Yeah.
And so that's just one thing I wanted to say about the impact statement, that the importance of the impact statement, but the importance of preceding that with preparing the one to talk about the way it got impacted and having the other one hear it, because it's not like he said, it's not like she hasn't, she's told me this before, but essentially he never heard it.
Yeah.
So, but the second thing I wanted to say, in addition to the impact statement idea, is that I don't think I mentioned this, but I also prepare them. I gave them each, you can see, you can hear me. I'm a little confused now. Let me see. What do I want to say? You can hear them say why it is that they did what they did. When they're reading their apology letter, they're saying, he said, for example, I felt hurt. That's why I hurt you back, which is a really important thing for him to say. As you may have realized, he has a hard time saying how he feels and knowing how he feels, and like so many people do. And so I had given them, prior to the first session, I had given them a list of feelings. And I don't think I put that feeling words in the toolbox. I guess I could do that.
That'd be great.
And it has, like, I felt hurt, I felt excluded, and you can see them using those words before they explain what they did. Because I asked them to do that. I asked them to say, well, how did you feel when she did that? And therefore, what did you do in return? So I'm going to try to do that and post the feeling list. I can't remember if I used the trigger list from the Gottman site. I may have used the trigger list from the Gottman site. So I will post it. Do you have any other comments or questions about the session before we move on to the lesson? I don't know if you have questions. People generally don't seem to have questions about the lessons, but maybe you do, so we'll see.
Well, I wanted to say, I'm sorry I was a few minutes late, and so I hope that I don't say something or ask something that already was brought up, but I really appreciated these sessions just because it's something that's it's happening and with couples that I have right now. And I find that especially with couples who are fairly intelligent, it's very slippery. Like in a conversation, like when you're trying to get to a certain place or a certain feeling or a certain idea, like I'm slippery. It's like there's always a way of explaining it or saying, oh yeah, I know this, or they team up all of a sudden and it's like, wait, what? I thought we were talking about something that upset you about this person, but then it's like they're taking up for one another. So there's always a lot of what I would call slippery movement. And so this session was really helpful just in that it was very slowed down. And I think like one example was when the husband said, yeah, I think that money is a big thing. I think money is a thing that we always have a problem with. I'm going to add that to my list. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Are you still doing the exercise we're doing? Like, is that something that you want her to apologize for? And he was like, well, no. And you're like, is that something you want to apologize for? And he was like, no. And you're like, okay, well, that doesn't go on the list then. which I was like, oh yeah, right. Cause I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe that's a good thing for them to talk about, but it wasn't actually on task with what you were doing. So it was just helpful to hear that, because it's so easy with thinkers for that stuff to just take off. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, we're not actually doing what we started off doing anymore. So I really appreciated that.
I do a lot of backtracking.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. I'm glad you're bringing that up. That is a big part of the work here, because I think slippery is a good word. Couples are very slippery,
Mhm.
and they will go off into tangents, and they will go off and forget what we're doing. Absolutely. And it happens. I mean, I do it as a modeling way, because I think that's part of what gets people into trouble when they're talking. So, right? So
Mhm.
if you've ever had a fight, you know why the fight happens. The fight happens because you're talking about one thing, and then all of a sudden you're talking about three other things. And they're like, well, wait a minute, what are we fighting about? Then you don't even know what you're fighting about.
Right.
So I use this as part of the modeling process of what does it take? You know, you have to get organized about what do you want to get out of the conversation. And so this is my way of getting them organized.
Mhm. Yeah, that was very helpful for me to hear. And also just to hear you at points in the session pause and say, well, now wait a minute, I'm getting confused here. Like, and because this happens to me all the time. And I think, okay, if it happens to Sarah occasionally, then it's okay. If in the middle of the moment, I don't actually know what I'm doing next for a second.
Yeah, and you hear me, I think you hear a little bit of my pauses, because I have no idea what I'm doing sometimes, or what do I want to do until I figure it out. And yeah, it happens all the
You
time.
even just did it with us earlier. You said, wait a minute, let me see what I want to say here.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's really helpful.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, the training, what taught me to do this are the reflecting teams. So I don't know if you remember anything about reflecting teams, if you learned that in school. Some people did, some people didn't. But the reflecting team model of training family therapists was to take a pause in the middle of the session and go out of the session. The therapist would take a pause, go out of the session, and have the team reflect and on what had just happened, and then the therapist would go back. But in going back, the therapist would say, well, here's what I was thinking and reflecting on from what we just talked about. So now I don't have a reflecting team, and I don't do the reflections myself, but I learned to try to infuse reflection within the session. And so, like, I'll take a few seconds to, so wait, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm thinking about what I want to do. I'm thinking about how I want to answer. And I sometimes literally say that. I'm a little confused. Let me see if I can clarify what we're doing or what I want. So yeah, I do that in the moment, because otherwise it's so triggering.
It seems like the essence of mindfulness. It's sort of like when the basis of my practice is mindfulness, and it's so easy to go on autopilot and just start.
It's so true.
And so it's like reeling myself back in over and over. And you just gave us sort of a model for how to do that very casually. It's really cool.
And also I was going to say that just the idea of the impact statement, I mean, you already talked about this a little bit, but I think that's so helpful, especially right now. I have a couple that is a doctor and an engineer, and getting to feelings is like, it's been a real feat, like trying to actually really get to like past just like, well, I'm annoyed or I'm frustrated, and get down to like, well, what's really happening? And so to talk about it in the sense of an impact statement actually feels really, really helpful, because it's not just how does that make you feel sort of idea, but it's like, how did that impact you? I feel like it's a nice strategy for how to get to the root of what's happening when whatever the, long-term fights that happen are happening.
Right. I was telling you that this comes from the Truth and Reconciliation Committees, but it's not just that. It comes from the justice system.
Mm.
So the victims, before the sentencing, before the judge does the sentencing, the victims do an impact statement. It's called an impact statement. In what ways did the crime impact the victims of the crime? So I agree, it's a very strong word, and it is much better than saying, how did that make you feel?
Mm-hmm. Not that I actually say that phrase, but
yeah, well, yeah, I know. Sometimes I do, but in general, I try not to. That's true.
yeah.
But I wanted to say something about Brent Atkinson. So I don't know if you know about his work. He's the founder of the Couples Clinic in Geneva, Illinois. He was my professor at Northern Illinois University when I did my doctoral degree many, many years ago. And he wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence in Couples Therapy. And the book is really wonderful. And I don't think I'll have enough. I was thinking about maybe I should include him as one of the frameworks, but I don't know if I'll be able to do that. But on his website, the Couples Clinic in Geneva, Illinois, he has several articles. This particular article, I love the concept. I don't know if you got to read it. The article is actually not very well written. And I've given it to some clients and they think it's awful and hate it. Carolyn, speaking about pulling back. So I've given articles to people that think they're wonderful, and I've given articles to the same article to people and they think it's awful. So, but the concept of this idea, I use this idea a lot, that we each think that our partners hurt us more than we hurt them. And the reason we think that has to do with poor differentiation. The reason we think that is because what hurts, as she recognized, what hurts him is very, very different than what hurt her. Very, very different. It's a little bit like the love languages, but in reverse. And we have this illusion that the way we hurt our partners is not as bad as the way they hurt us. But that's because they're different. And what hurts them is different than what hurt us. And so I love that article because of that concept, and I use it a lot. And I use it with this couple, and they eventually got it.
That stood out. And now I'm not remembering if it was the end of this session or the one before, since I listened to them kind of close together, or the couple before. But it struck me when the person said specifically to you, can you tell me that term again? And it was the differentiation term, that they really took in that concept that you're just saying. I mean, it is easy to forget that people aren't thinking outside of their own translation of the partner.
Right, that is true. Yeah, this, I think it was module 4. It was a couple that, when he started talking about wanting to go on vacation, on getting out of the city in the winter, and she felt betrayed by what he wanted, as if it was a reflection on, why is saying what he wants have anything to do with feeling like he doesn't he's not listening to what you're saying. That's not what he did. He only
Mhm.
talked about what he wanted. Why do you feel offended by that?
Mhm.
So yeah, that's when she said the word,
Right.
I think he said it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Because I've been teaching them about it.
Yeah, but it's just stood out to me how it's like one of those light bulb moments it felt like for them of just,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. Um,
Okay, do you have any questions about the, more questions or comments about the sessions? Or do you have any questions or comments about the lesson?
Well, let's see. This is just a information question. You had mentioned having them do an apology quiz online.
Yeah,
What is that?
right.
Or
Thank you
where is
for,
it?
I meant to mention that and I forgot. Thank you so much for bringing that up. So the apology quiz is something you can find online. It's called The Language of Apology. It was written, the book, The Language of Apology, was written by Gary Chapman. And he is the author of the Love Languages. So if you remember, he's a minister and has sold millions and millions and millions of copies of the Love Languages. And then he wrote this Language of Apology. Because, and I didn't pay too much attention to it in the second session. I should have. I think I forgot that I had asked them to do that. And I think it helps some people to, he actually mentioned it. He says, what I need from her is to do something different. What she needs from me is to acknowledge. So he acknowledged the difference between the two, the two of them in terms of what they like from an apology. I also want to mention that there is a new book on apology by Harriet Lerner.
Wonderful.
I think it's called Why Won't You Apologize? But I can't be sure. I think it came out 1 or 2 years ago. And I actually want to go back to Todd's comment about the apology in an infidelity case and say that the timing of interventions is so important, right? So part of what I was thinking that I made a mistake is like I went too fast. I asked, I'm setting this up too soon. They're not ready. They're not going to be able to do it. And with infidelity cases, that's also very important. So I'm working right now with 2 infidelity cases, and in one, the apology came like months later. He wouldn't have been able to tolerate it. She wouldn't have been able to write it. I mean, it was it took a while. So we had some work to do before. So I wanted to normalize that so that, it's in the case that you heard, the apology work came earlier than it does in many other cases. And maybe because they were on the brink of divorce, maybe because I felt some urgency to do that. Did I answer your question, Monica?
Yes, yeah, about the apology quiz, and this is also good other information about the. Actually, there is. I listened to. I love Harriet Lerner. I think I read her book, The Dance of Anger.
Yes.
When I was like, I think 18. And I think that is the beginning of me being Bohemian. Like it helped me make so much sense of my life and my relationship with my mom and my family. like it never went away. Like from then on I saw it. But so I love her, and I knew about her book, and I had Googled it a while ago, and what came up was a podcast that where she was talking about the book. And it was I think Brené Brown has a podcast called, I think it's called Unlocking Us, or I can't remember. I don't know. Brené Brown has a podcast, and she interviewed Harriet Lerner. And so Harriet, in that podcast, she goes through all the different kinds of apology and whatever. And so it was very, it was really good. It's definitely quicker than reading the book. Obviously not all of it, but it's a really, really thoughtful look at apology.
That's great. I might do that. I might want to listen to that. I love Brené Brown's podcast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Unlocking Us. That's what it's called. Yeah.
Okay.
The podcast is called that, but yeah. But yes, you answered the question. Thank you. I think that's something that I always feel when couples are, so I have a couple, the one that I mentioned before, and the wife has threatened divorce a few different times in arguments. And so there is a sense of urgency about them getting stuff figured out, because they don't want to get divorced, but it's really bad. And I think that there's always this sense of like, they have urgency and they are very intelligent, but I'm having to work on like saying, yes, but we have to like, it's almost like you have to get to a remedial level of the kind of communication that needs to happen. And they're like, no, we're in a hurry, and we already know this, and we already know our families are like this and whatever. And so like that tension of like, yes, it's urgent, but we have to also like take it down a notch or two and get back to the very basic of, how did that impact you, or who needs to, what is it that you need to apologize for? Do you, that kind of stuff. So, I think overall this was helpful because
that's a good thing the comment that you're making is that you are the leader with the treatment plan. And so when you present it, I think one of the things that strengthens the alliance is whether they agree with your treatment plan.
Mm-hmm.
So I show you, I have you listen to sessions where it works, but it doesn't always work. You cannot always convince or sell your treatment plan and what you think needs to happen with what they think needs to happen. Is what you think needs to happen, they don't agree with it, then you're going to have a weak alliance and the treatment is not going to work. So you got to try to get them on the same page about what your goals are and make them match with their goals for themselves and their relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is a helpful thing to remember. This couple, in talking about it, I was talking about the initiator listener dialogue, because having conversations is really hard for them. And they're like, yeah, we had a therapist before a long time ago that told us how to do this. Okay, so we're done with that. Moving on. Clearly it works.
Sounds like the kind of couple who are not going to make the work easy for you. They're fighting you on the treatment goals.
Right, and they join together. Like they join in fighting me about it's an interesting thing. I've only had 2 sessions with them together and then 1 with each of them separate. But so this is helpful for me for when I meet with them next to kind of like back up, let's lay this out and talk about how this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So
and for people who feel the need to control things a little more, which sometimes smart people want to, you might ask them to pick. So the way you do with children, do you want to go to sleep at 5 or 5:30? And so they think they have a choice.
Right.
that's a great idea.
That's a good idea. Yes.
taught that to my daughter and she's like, it works. So the 4-year-old now says, 5:30. Okay, great. It's 5:30. Time to go. Or whatever, 8:30.
Yes.
Mhm.
So you know, if you find that there's a little bit of a push-pull from your leadership, maybe you can ask them to choose.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Welcome.
I think this is funny, Sarah. You thought there wouldn't be enough to talk about.
Yeah, well, I am always worried. Is anybody going to show up? I'm not asking you to tell me if you're going to show up or not. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like, who's going to show up to the party? And I am concerned that, I don't know. I sometimes I reach out to people who are not present, and they tell me that they get a lot out of the conversation, even though they're not present. So I'm hoping that that's the case for most people.
Mhm.
Oh, I was aware even before we do this each time. I get so much concrete, practical, new interventions, new ways to interact. So even if I wasn't able to do these, I still go away with a ton.
Right, that's the other thing. I'm hoping that the sessions alone are helpful to people, for people to listen to. I want to also tell you and let everyone else know that you'll be starting to get launching emails. So I'm launching again February 9th. The subscription will open on February 14th, and there will be hopefully some new people. I'm not making a lot of marketing efforts, but you'll probably read the same emails you read when you first joined. And you can either ignore them or you can forward it to people that you think might be interested in the academy information.
Mhm. Would you be starting them from module 1, or do they
No, they're
just
going to
join
be
in
starting
here?
from module 6.
Okay.
So February 15th will be module 6, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're starting on module 6, and that's a little bit confusing for people, but I think that the modules I'm trying to make them independent.
Yeah. Yeah. And people could go back and review the prior ones, I assume, or they would just cycle through the next year.
They can cycle if they continue to be subscribers for 1 year, when they get to module
Gotcha.
12, they'll start module 1.
Gotcha. Okay.
Like you guys who've come in later, Todd and Robin.
Mhm.
You'll if you stay for a year, you'll well, I think I gave the November launch people the
I think you
module
did. Yeah.
1
Mhm.
as a bonus. I
Mhm.
don't think I'm giving a bonus this time.
Mhm.
I don't expect to have too many new subscribers. Maybe that's my way of preparing myself for that. I would like to have a few more, but I'm not doing a big marketing effort because because I have my own clinical practice and I'm working on the content. So there's only so much I can do.
Mhm.
But I have more emails now on my email list than I used to when I started. I started with 250 and now I have 700. So I'm doing some marketing, but not a whole lot.
Yeah. Well, when I first started, when I first joined, and that concept of, okay, I'm going to miss the first 2, and I remember emailing you saying, well, what do I do about the first 2? It works fine because they are standalone.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so it just took me a session, a module to like get it and realize, oh, this is fine. It works fine.
So anything about the lessons? This module had the systemic one, and I even forgot what the other one was.
Solution
focus.
focused. Yeah.
Solution focus, yeah. So do you have any questions or comments about that?
Sort
or
of
go back to the case, whatever.
But just going off what you said about, when I read something, it's what I use the next day. It's a good reminder to me. One of the things that I took out of it was that the initial questions that I'm asking when I meet couples, it took me back to that, refer to the frame and sort of looking at the solution focused. It was helpful to have just, things that you would say in the beginning, rather than what brought you here, kind of, where are you trying to go with this relationship, sets a different tone to what they're expecting from me and implies what I'm thinking about them. And I mean, not that we can't continue the conversation the whole hour with all of the questions, but it's been very helpful to just kind of keep that at the front of my brain, to be intentional about that.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good reminder. Where do they want to go?
Mm-hmm.
It's not an easy question to answer.
No.
What is the vision of their relationship? What is
Mhm.
that they want? What is it that they want? What is a vision? That mean that I've been wanting to tell you about this case and I wasn't sure, but now that you're talking about the solution focused framework and the reminder of the vision of where they want to go, it reminds me of, and I always try to tell you about cases that don't go well because they're not on the modules. Usually I try to show you the ones that go well. I don't know that I have a lot of recorded sessions that don't go well. I'm going to have to go back and see. But I've been working with a couple that have been extremely challenging. I believe that they are mutually, verbally, and emotionally abusive. I believe that one member of the partnership is probably on the borderline spectrum. And the other member of the couple has addiction. I mean, this is really complicated couple. And again, it's about the alliance and about creating a treatment plan that they can agree on. And it's about creating empathy for each of their situations. I did not succeed. I did not succeed. And I had 4 or 5, maybe 6 sessions with them. And then I had one with each of them individually. And I said, look, to one, I don't know if I will be able to be helpful. My recommendation is that you do this or that. And then I had the other member of the couple and I did the same. I don't know if I can be helpful.
Mhm.
I think when I used the word mutually, emotionally, and verbally abusive, they didn't like it, but I did use it. And that was it.
Mhm.
And then I don't think they'll follow my recommendations, which was for addictions treatment and individual treatment and medication.
Mhm.
I mean, there are some things about the case I don't want to say anymore because that, it would be revealing of some information, but I can't even remember if I recorded any of them. I'm going to go back and look. And it just, after a week, one member of the couple wrote to me that he or she felt that I betrayed them by whatever I did. So you can't help everyone.
I had a very similar situation about 3 years ago, only that one partner was borderline and the other partner was very, very passive and insecure. And the borderline partner, it basically came to a point where I said, I'm not going to be able to help. And I had referrals. but the borderline partner became very, very angry and demanded that I continue working with her.
Mhm.
And I just repeatedly said, I don't think I'm going to be helpful. So it's not ethically appropriate. I don't think I have what you need. And I referred them.
Right, and those are the boundaries that we have to put for ourselves, right? You can't be working harder than the clients. You have to be able to tell them that.
It was really painful. And it was
Mhm.
very hard when that one person was pushing to like think, okay, well, am I just escaping here? Do I need to like
Mhm.
get more skills and jump back in here and get supervision? And I just thought, no, I don't want to. It doesn't feel right. It felt wrong somehow.
Mhm.
I would have been doing it for me, not for them.
Right, and I wonder about that too. You know, this is when I think they would be better off with somebody with experience with narcissism and borderline personality disorders, and I'm not it. They would be better off with a different therapist.
Yeah.
Um,
I had a lot of experience individually with borderline, but not with couples,
Mhm.
which is interesting.
Mhm.
but I'm just saying that it affects my confidence, my clinical confidence, the way that
Totally.
I'm trying to help you so that to be less affected by that, but it does. I mean, the
Yeah.
cases that don't go well are very difficult,
Yeah.
very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Who do we refer to in Chicago area for couples with borderline folks in them? I would say the same thing, that that's hard. You know, I always feel like who am I going to send you to? Honestly, my
Now-
friends don't want that either, right? So they don't want the case.
Right, and it's interesting because I could have done that. I could have tried to refer them to another couples therapist, but I didn't. I refer them each to, I thought they each had individual work to do.
Sure.
But I
Yeah.
guess I could, that would be an idea. I could have said, you
Yeah.
know, not me, but here's somebody with more experience in your kind of situation.
Yeah.
Um,
I have a couple like that as well. Like, it's part of why I'm asking, where the one has the borderline tendencies and the other is not so much passive, but willing to give over more. And I do feel like we're reaching a line where the person with more tendencies is beginning to fight about the quality of the therapy with me a bit, and not directly, but very, we're in therapy and she's blaming the partner. We should be done by now. The partner must be failing, of course, at not making the therapy go better, but it's going to veer towards me pretty quickly, I can see.
do you know Carla Leone?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
She's a self-psychologist and she probably has
Yeah.
a lot of good work with people in the narcissistic spectrum.
Okay. Thank you. I forgot about that's a good reminder.
I forgot about her too.
Yeah. Gosh.
And who knows if she has any, I don't know about
Yeah.
her.
How do you spell her last name?
Leone.
Okay.
She's written a couple of wonderful articles, a couple of on infidelity, actually.
Huh. Okay.
So anyway, I'm going to put the trigger list or the feeling list in the toolbox, and I'll upload the module. I mean this Zoom call. Do I stretch it for the 90 minutes, even though we seem to have reached the end, or is that not, or should I just be silent and wait?
You're open. I feel okay stopping early if people want to. I feel like I got a lot of questions answered, but I'm open if people want to talk more.
This is the giving us a choice part. 5 or 5:30? Yeah, I'm okay with stopping.
Okay. So then, till next time, it was a pleasure to have you on the Zoom call and to get an opportunity to answer your questions and to hear your feedback. You know, it's really, really helpful for me. It's a great incentive to keep going and doing this work.
Well, we appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Yes.
This is
Yes,
so helpful.
so helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
so much.
Yes.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank
See you next time.
Bye.
See you next time.